Welcome to the PurpleArmy podcast with myself, Ross McGregor, Graeme Thompson and Stephen McLernan. In this episode we will be discussing David Phillips and the Hull Stingrays, the return of Todd and Danny to Kirkcaldy. Graeme Murdoch from Murdoch Hockey Blog will join us to discuss these signings from a Fife perspective. The return of Chuck Webber to Coventry Blaze and the signing of Ned Lukacevic. And last but not least, the Sheffield Steelers and Paul Thompson. I'm joined this week again by Graeme Thompson and Stephen McLernan. How are you, gentlemen?
I'm fine, thanks, Ross.
Fine, thanks, Ross.
I think we'd all like to echo our sentiments and send in good wishes and congratulations to Zach Fitzgerald and his new wife Chris on their marriage yesterday in the Highlands of Scotland, and it's nice to see they've hung about, and hopefully they'll hang about next year when Zach signs another deal. We'd be happy to see him coming back, gentlemen.
Yeah, I definitely would. Hopefully he is back next year. I think he's a good influence in the dressing room, and it's the sort of player you'd like to have around your team, and hopefully he's back again next year.
And Graeme, was your invitation lost in the post?
My invitation was lost in the post, but it's a thought that counts, so I wish them all the best.
I'd also like to say that this week, Wednesday night in the David Lloyd in Renfrew at 7 o'clock, it's the Braid Clan Official Supporters Club annual general meeting. I think myself, Stephen and Stephanie are going to head along to that, so anybody who's a member of the club and wants to have a say on the AGM and who's going to be in the committee next year, they can head along and have their vote. Moving on to the news, things that have happened in the Elite League this week, I think we'll come to you first, Stephen, with the news that David Phillips ended up signing for Hull.
Yeah, it turns out my mole at the club, who I've just made up, was wrong with his information that he was definitely signing for us. I'm quite disappointed that we won't be seeing him in a purple jersey next season, but you never know what happens in the future. I think it's his hometown club. I think that's probably what swayed it in the end, and yeah, disappointing that we've missed out on him, but I'm sure Finner and Gareth have got a few tricks up their sleeve, and we'll see some signings in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know. I heard the rumour the same as you, but it's like everything else, it's easy to start a rumour if you really want to. How true the rumour was about the clan talking to him, I don't know. You'd like to think they might have exchanged some pleasantries and explored what might have been. As you say, it's his hometown team. It's a bit of a shame that we haven't managed to capture him, but then again there's still a few very good British D-men who are unsigned, and again with the change in the import rules this year, I mean, I think I said last week that I felt we really needed to have a solid Brit D to sit beside Zach Sullivan in terms of in the roster to give us that extra forward. But with the extra import this year, maybe it's not as crucial as I maybe thought it was. Graeme, your thoughts on David Phillips?
Well, I think, as we've discussed before, quality Brits being at a premium, it's obviously disappointing not to pick up somebody of David Phillips' quality. I think it's great news for Hull, because obviously they'll be looking to follow up on a relatively successful season for them, and forever being in the position of perhaps being the outsider as far as the Gardner Conference is concerned. They'll be looking to strengthen their team as much as they can, and I think it's a great pick-up for them. As you say, whether it's the home ties that have done it or whatever, it doesn't matter, it's still a great sign for them, and I'm sure we're on the case for the quality Brits.
I mean, yeah, you look at Hull, who they've signed in for the D so far. Obviously they've got David Phillips. This week they also signed Jamie Chilcott, the young, I think he's 21-year-old young British guy. He's played about 100 and odd EIHL games for them over the last couple of years. And obviously Omar Pasha and Jan Turcotte. I think Jan Turcotte is in the second year of a deal. That's them got 4 decent D-men. I think our conference, certainly the way it's looking at the moment, might be a lot tighter than it was last year if things are continuing to go like that. And that brings us nicely round to Fife, who announced their first 2 signings this week in re-signing Todd and Danny. What's your feelings on that one, Graeme?
Well, if I was a Fife fan, which I'm not, obviously, I would probably be a little disappointed. And I think there's quite a few Fife fans out there who are disappointed, certainly from what I've been seeing on social media this week. I think as far as Dutz is concerned, the general feeling is nice guy, loyal, long-time servant to the club, but can he take us any further? I think that's the Fife fans' growing view of the situation. I think this is him going into his 11th season as head coach for Fife. Obviously, he spent quite a few years as player coach. Where he takes him, I'm not quite sure. Simply because I think when they joined the Elite League, they obviously had a difficult first season. They finished bottom, didn't make the playoffs. After that, they've had 2 seasons where they finished 7th. And I think the first of those 2 seasons they lost out in the quarterfinals, but then they made it to the semi-finals, which is obviously a great achievement along with ourselves. But last season it was a backward step again, finished 8th and had a quarter-final loss. So questions I think under those circumstances have to be asked about where Todd can take the squad now. A lot of people will say it's about budget. I've said it myself that Fife need to loosen the purse strings, not having that much in-depth knowledge of their finances, but I think it's common. I think the common perception is that Fife, especially with the good attendances that they're getting nowadays, what I've been told is that they have very, very limited overheads as far as the use of Fife Ice Arena is concerned. So they should have a good budget for players, and it's how that budget is used. Also, the other fact as well is, I think the common perception as well is that they had a split dressing room. Certainly for the latter part of last season. Reasons for that are many and varied, according to who you listen to. But the fact of the matter is, they had some serious problems behind the scenes in that respect, and that was certainly a major contribution to the downturn in the form in the second half of the season. So having the same, what do you do? Do you replace the majority of the squad? I think Fife fans at the moment would suggest that's probably what you need to do if you're not going to replace the coaching staff. So yeah, as I say, as a Fife fan, I'd be disappointed. I think we need Fife to be strong. Speaking as a Clan fan, I've said this before, and for me this is an intrinsic part of the whole conference system thing. If we're still going to be stuck with this system, then we need certainly our so-called big rival these days, Fife, to be strong. At the moment, I would suggest that that the early signs are that may not be the case for next season, but it's all down to who Todd signs. Danny Stewart, again, I think that this is him going into his 5th season with Fife, and I would probably expect to see maybe more influence from him on the coaching side this season coming. But again, I just think perhaps as a team, I'm not quite sure if that's going to take Fife much further. Common perception was that Danny was going to go to Dundee, but whether or not those conversations took place, we don't know. But he's obviously decided to stay at Fife. He thinks that's what's best for him. But yeah, like I say, I think deep reservations at this moment in time about where Fife are going to be heading for next season.
Yeah, it's certainly said in the press release that Danny had turned down offers from other teams, and if you're looking at it from a logical point of view, that must be Dundee, unless he'd been offered a playing contract or an assistant coaching job down at Edinburgh. Stephen, do you think this could be Todd's last chance to do something at Fife before patience runs out with him?
Fife are an odd team in the way that there seems to be some strict loyalty to certain people. Obviously, Jutes, as you said, has been there for the better part of 20 years, so there is a loyalty there. But it seems that with certain players as well, that like Bobby Chamont's been there for a while, despite some fan unrest about his involvement with the team. And I think that with Jutes there, I don't think it will be his last chance at all. Really, I think he'll be given every chance to succeed, and I think that's where some fans' frustrations are coming in. I would have thought that maybe this would have been the time for Danny Stewart to be given a crack at the coaching job by himself and see what he could do with the team, because I think even a small change of just moving Danny Stewart up to head coach would maybe work wonders. And I think that's where a lot of fans from what I've seen on Twitter, have been a bit miffed by the announcements this week. But at the end of the day, I don't think Jutes returning was really a shock to anyone who was from the outside looking in. And maybe this will, as you said, it might be his last chance, but I really don't see it. I think even if it's another 8th place finish and into the playoffs, then maybe that will be enough to keep him on next year as well.
certainly talking to the Fife Flyers fans that I know, he seems to have polarised opinion as far as retaining his job this year. I think if they have another year, this year like they did, next year like they did this year, I think it might well, certainly as far as the fans are concerned, they'll certainly be calling, most of them will be calling for a change the way things are going. There also seems to be, as Graeme touched on, the perception that the ownership is maybe not financially backing the team as much as it could be. We're obviously not in a position to know that, but Fife are averaging over 2,000 a game, which is level with likes of Coventry, Cardiff, in terms of attendance. So they're bringing those receipts in. We obviously have no information as to what it actually costs to use the arena, the ice. I would imagine that it's a lot less than what the Clan are paying, for example, which maybe levels that playing field out a wee bit. And I'd like to think that Fife ownership, if there is any more money in the coffers, would give it to the guys to build the team, because as Graeme says, the way the conference is just now, Hull are looking as if they're going to be a lot better this year already, although they've still got a lot of forward positions to sign. It would be good for Fife to come back and give us a game. Obviously we like to win these games, but last year it was pretty obvious the Clan were going to win the conference, but even by January, if not earlier, and unless there was some major disaster around the corner. So just in terms of us, and I think we talked about it before, we were 7-2 against Fife. I think we lost the first 2 away games we played up there at the start of the season, and after that we won every single game. Although some of them were tight, they were tighter than they probably should have been, and tighter than the play had suggested when you were watching the game. So yeah, I'm not sure. If I was a Fife fan, I like the loyalty. For us, I like that we've got Ryan back for his third year. If I was up in Fife, I don't know how I would be feeling. Obviously there was all the situation with Todd a few years ago and everybody was backing him. I'm not saying he's not a good coach, but sometimes change can just make that little bit of difference, a wee bit of culture change. But then maybe that's what they don't want in Fife. I don't know, maybe they're scared of a culture change that might bring a wee bit more success, which might also in turn mean having to put out a wee bit more money. I don't know. Any other thoughts, gentlemen?
I think what we've seen at other clubs this past season, that a culture change is for the best sometimes, with the Coventry situation and Chuck Webber just coming in, instilling a winning mentality in a group of players who looked down and out at Christmas. And I think maybe that is what Fife need to look at doing. But if they're all about not spending some money, hopefully that means they're saving up for a new net at the way end, and we'll get something better next season.
Yeah, I think the situation with Fife is obviously, as far as the budget's concerned, anybody new coming in as a coach would probably be looking for some guarantees on the budget, which was probably a little bit of a different relationship than the Fife ownership currently have. So there's that challenge straight away. And the other factor, of course, as well, is frankly us, the Clan. There's with this new big rivalry, anything that the Clan do to move further ahead of the other teams in the conference, and in that case Fife, is obviously good news for us, but it's something that I don't think fans of other teams, in particular Fife, are really going to be settling for. So having a growing trend towards people questioning how the club is run, coached, finance, whichever aspect you want to look at, I think that's a big challenge for Fife coming up now. And if they don't get off to a good start with the season, I think the daggers will be out very, very early on for the whole management of the club as far as the way things are going. So if the fans get on the club's back from a very, very early stage of the season, that will not help matters at all. But I'm sure they've thought of that already.
Yeah, I'm sure it remains to be seen, and it'll be interesting to find out how that will develop over the course of the new season. During the course of the week, I had the chance to speak to Graham Murdoch, and he gave his views on the Fife situation. I'm joined now by Graeme Murdoch, who is on Twitter as Murdoch Hockey and has a blog at www.murdochshockeyblog.blogspot.uk. Graeme's a Fife Flyers fan, and he's going to be joining us during the course of the season to discuss all things up in the kingdom. How are you, Graeme?
Yeah, I'm good. About yourself?
I'm not bad at all. It's been a busy couple of days for you guys up in Fife, is it not?
Yeah, it has. After sort of radio silence for about a month, all of a sudden 3 stories come along at once. So, they certainly keep us busy, don't they?
As you say, it's been quiet for a wee while now. All of a sudden, you've got bang, bang, bang. First, I'd like to ask you about your feelings on the return of your head coach, Todd.
I mean, I think it got a mixed response, but I mean, you're talking about a guy who's a club legend, he's been with the club for 18 seasons now. To think that he wasn't going to be involved in any capacity this season's foolish. Talking about a guy who's played upwards of 450 games, scored over 700 points for the club. He wasn't not going to be involved, especially the fact he stood by the club during the SNL time, and obviously what he's gone through in his personal life with the club standing by him. There was no doubt in my mind that he was going to be involved in the club in some capacity. Maybe a little surprised that he's still got the head coach role, if you like. I think some people maybe would have expected him to get a different role within the club. I don't know what that role would be. I know there have been some rumours of sort of a general manager type role, but I'm not surprised in the slightest that he's back on the bench, and I'm quite happy that he's back, to be honest.
You're saying you're quite happy that he's back. What do you think the average Flyers fan's thinking at the moment?
I think it's probably mixed. It's probably split down the middle. There's probably a couple of people that think like myself. He's a long time servant in the club, and there's probably some people who are wanting change. I think, without doubt, after the season we've just had, there's change required. It's clear that the owners don't think that change is in the coaching department, but it must be in the player personnel, because we only won 22 games in the league last season, so there's obviously massive room for improvement in that sense.
Obviously, both ourselves and yourselves, Fife and Clan, got down to the playoffs last year. It was quite disappointing, I think, that neither of us made it this year. We had maybe a slightly more successful season, won the conference, won quite a few games. What do you think went wrong with Fife this year, if you do indeed think things went wrong?
I think the main thing is something that Todd touched upon in his interview with the Fife Free Press this week, where he was talking about consistency, talking about players maybe not giving 100% all the time. The big thing for me is probably close games. We didn't win enough close games. So I was looking at this earlier today. Based on the 62 games we had this year, 26 of them were decided either by 1 goal or 2 goals, where the final goal was an empty netter in the last minute. The Flyers only won 5 of them in regulation. Highlights sort of the big area in terms of, we could blow out teams if teams let us play. The likes of Edinburgh and Dundee, if they let us play, we'd run up big scores. When it got close, we weren't the ones getting the 2 points out of that game. So that's probably the big one for me.
And what do you think? What could you put that down to? What was causing that?
I think it's probably a case of players taking the odd shift off here or there. I'm not going to be one of those ones that says the referees are all against us or anything like that. I think it comes down to the players, maybe the coaching. There's just that extra level of consistency required in order to be a team that challenges on a regular basis. And I think that's probably what Clan were successful at doing this year, was they were able to win the close games, they were able to dominate games where they perhaps wouldn't have in the past.
Yeah, I think the season before we maybe struggled the way you described yourself struggling last year. For us this year, I think it has been a wee bit more successful. Our team certainly for the first probably 70% of the season looked as if they couldn't lose, and you always felt they were in the game. As it got towards the end of the season, I think for us, I believe that we kind of just ran out of steam. Too many niggly injuries caught up with us, but I suppose every team's got in that situation. But for us, I think it was just too many niggly injuries.
Yeah, I think everybody has injuries and suspensions as the season goes on. I think Clan were maybe a bit unlucky that they came at the end of the year rather than the middle, whereas teams like Sheffield and that kind of kept clean towards the end of the season,
So obviously we had the news this morning as well that Danny Stewart's returning. So there's been no change at all at the top. I haven't read some of the stuff in the forum. I know some people were on the forum were bemoaning that they needed a change of style. They needed somebody else to come in, and there was a bit of talk, as you kind of alluded to earlier, that Todd might move to a kind of more back back office type position, and Danny might take over. How do you feel that dynamic's going to work out during the course of the season?
Well, I think it's something that's kind of tried and trusted over 5 years now. I mean, I don't know really. I'm not being privy to what goes on in the dressing room. I don't know how the dynamic works, but you get the impression that the two of them kind of work together, and that they are two coaches doing the job of one sometimes. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think they're a good dynamic that work together. Obviously, their message maybe wasn't getting across in this last season, but the fact that between the two of them they were able to produce a team that was second in penalty killing and second in power play. Specialty teams are the most difficult things to coach, so if we're coming out second in both categories, then it shows there's at least some degree of coaching going on with the guys, and maybe the rest of it was the players' lack of attention or drifting off and taking shifts off or whatever.
Do you think if Fife have another season like last, do you think that'll be Todd's last swing at it?
With the season that's just happened, I don't think something like that would be accepted again. I think sneaking into the playoffs with, the lowest amount of points in the league, that's not really where the fans want. I don't really think that's where the management want to be either. So yeah, I would say that quite safely this is probably the last opportunity to prove that they are capable of making the Flyers successful at this level.
Later on this afternoon we had the news that Ned Lukacevic was moving to Coventry. What's your reaction to that?
I think he's an excellent addition to Coventry. I think he's a fantastic player, highly skilled. Not surprised that he's not rejoined the Flyers, just purely based on the comments that are coming out from Todd and Danny, and that they're saying they're wanting more consistency within the team. I think Ned probably had a reputation at least of taking the odd shift off here or there, maybe being a bit loose on the puck sometimes, but when he gets to play his game, he's an excellent player. I think with the sort of a stricter structure with Chuck Webber, I think the sky's the limit in terms of what he can achieve. I mean, I said this last season when we re-signed him, that if he stayed on his game, he'd be top 3 in scoring in the league, and I sort of maintain that point, with the fact he's gone to Coventry. I think he could really tear up the league, to be honest.
Yeah, I have to say, from my point of view, when I saw him playing against us, he felt like the most dangerous Fife player. When he got the puck, he could take it through a few players, and I think I agree with you, though, sometimes it could be just a little bit inconsistent. So it was a bit of both. He could take a game of the scruff of the neck, or you could see him maybe, not hiding might not be the right word, but taking a shift or two off and being ineffective. So yeah, I can understand where you're coming from there. As far as other things that I've noticed on fans talking about the Brit pack and the need to try and acquire some more experienced Brits, do you have any views on that?
Yeah, and I don't really know where I stand on it. I kind of see both points of view. I think if the Flyers want to be successful, they probably do need to be looking at improving all aspects of the team. Certainly, I think when they added somebody like John Dolan a couple of years ago, I think that was seen as a real positive move. But obviously he went back to Dundee, and I don't really think anybody can begrudge a guy, wanting to go back to play for his hometown team. But it's a phrase that kind of gets bandied about quite a lot. It's like the Fife way, which is that the Flyers always produce and sort of support their own local talent. And that's something that's been true of the 20 years I've been going to the Flyers. It's always been, the British players have been predominantly from Kirkcaldy and the surrounding area. And I quite like that about the club. I quite like the fact that there are the local players, and not every team can actually have that privilege, if you like, to have local players playing for them. So I quite like that. But I do think that if we're looking to overhaul the import corps of the team, then we probably need to be looking at improving the British side of it as well.
Yeah, I think obviously at the Clan we don't have that youth setup. But when we had Zach Sullivan last year, with him being a young British player, everybody was right behind him. And I think for us, signing Jordan County this year is kind of the way we need to go, because I don't think we can compete with the slightly bigger teams in terms of signing the better Brits out there. Getting the young guys in, I think, is the way to go. But I think where we were lucky last year, and to get somebody like Ben Davis in, you've got Matt Haywood, who's got 5 years' experience. Yep. I think you need a wee mixture. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think getting the one thing is the guys that are with the with the Flyers now, the British guys, none of them are young players now in that sense. I think Josh Schoon's the youngest, but even then he's in his sort of early to mid-20s, so I think it's seeing that next generation that the Flyers maybe want to see. If we're wanting to develop young players, then it's maybe worth starting to blood some of the younger guys that are playing with the Kirkcaldy Kestrels. I don't watch the Kestrels enough to know if these guys are ready as such. It's just names that get bandied about, but I think that's kind of what I would like to see certainly over the next season.
So moving on, we've still got to sign your first player, I believe, is that correct?
Well, yeah, I think Danny Stewart is going to be playing this year, so I don't know if he counts or not.
So who would you like to see back, and who do you think will be back from last year's core?
I think from the comments from the coaches over the last couple of days, there's not going to be many players back. Obviously, Ned's already moved on. I would expect only a handful of players to be coming back. I think somebody like Kyle Haynes would be, if he's continuing to play this season, I think he'd be an excellent addition to the team. Solid at both ends. I think he's got a really good work ethic as well, and I think that's probably something that bestow upon a couple of other players. I wouldn't be surprised if Bobby Chamont's back either. He seems to have really settled with the Flyers. He's another one of those players that you maybe don't notice for large periods of the time, but he's averaged almost 30 goals a season in the time he's been with the Flyers. So
I think he's managed to polarise both our team's support, hasn't
he? Yeah, he really has. Yeah, I think if you have the right players with him, that first season where he left you guys and he joined us and he played with Jason Pitton and Casey Haynes, he scored so many points because he had two really hard working players right beside him, and I think he had Chris Hogg on that line for a while when Haynes was injured. And I think when he's got the right line mates, he's unstoppable because he's one of the best snipers in the league.
Oh yeah, his scoring rate, after, particularly that season where he did leave us to go to you, I think his scoring rate was through the roof. And he's always scored goals. I think the knock on him for his detractors has certainly been his two-way play, or lack of it, if you like. He'd have no chance under Ryan Finnerty and the style he plays, and I think he has found a home up in Kirkcaldy. It certainly seems to be that way. So what do you think will happen with Matt Nickerson this season?
I'm not too sure. I mean, there's obviously rumours out there that he's moving on to another club, whether it's in the Elite League or elsewhere. I know there'll be a lot of fans and there'll be a lot of t-shirts getting sold if he came back, but I'm not going to lose a great deal of sleep if he doesn't come back. But equally, if he does come back, I'll be more than happy to see him. I think he's an odd figure, and I think he's kind of the pantomime villain when it comes to the Braehead and Flyers fixtures, which maybe adds to them a little bit.
It certainly doesn't do the attendance figures any harm, I don't think.
No, I think you're right. I think every time Braehead play the Flyers, you're looking at whether it's Fife or whether it's Glasgow, there's 3,000 people there, so it's it probably gets the people coming to the games,
I have to say about Matt Nickerson, I think he gets a bit of a bad press in terms of how well he can actually play. He's not the quickest.
No, he's not. No.
But usually you see that he can play a very good stretch pass from defence. I've seen him knocking it from the defensive zone straight to the opposite blue line. And it's not a fluke, he's done it quite a few times. And he's a big body that clears the crease.
Yeah, he plays with a big stick, so he's got a great poke check on him. He reads the game defensively really well. Probably for his ability, in terms of his power, it probably doesn't score enough. He's got a cracking shot on him. So I'm often surprised that he doesn't put up as many points as he perhaps should.
Do you think if he does leave, it would be a case of you'd have to replace him with a similar type of player?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if it'd be a like-for-like replacement in terms of a stay-at-home defenceman that can kind of do what he does. It's probably, in terms of roster management, that it's probably better for it to be a forward that plays on, or on or between the second and third lines. I don't know whether a defenceman would be the right replacement for somebody like Nickerson.
And I've also seen a bit of debate on your forum about which way the Flyers should go this year, whether they should go down this big power forward route or whether they should go for the speed and the skill. What way do you think would be best for you to go?
Obviously, in an ideal world, you go for a mixture of both, don't you? I think the Flyers have kind of always gone for the skillful players over the bigger players in the time that I've been watching them. Probably in the BNL days, that was quite successful. I think in the Elite League, you probably do have to go for the bigger players. I think everybody would want somebody like Lee Salters playing for them. That's not as it's not as easy as it sounds, but that's the sort of player I think that most teams would kind of want.
I'd like to thank you for joining us, Graeme, and we'll hopefully speak to you again during the course of the season upcoming.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Obviously, as Graeme alluded to and we spoke about in his interview, Ned Lukacevic has signed for Coventry this week. Do you think that's a good move for Coventry, Stephen?
There's a link between Chuck Webber and Ned Lukacevic in the past, and maybe going back to a sort of a familiar coach will be the thing that can maybe move him up a gear. And I think with the moves that Coventry have been making off ice this week, that maybe there will be a stronger team for him, and that'll benefit his play more than it would have up at Fife.
Yeah, there was rumours that Lukachevich might have been on the Clan radar. Graeme, how would you have felt if we had signed him?
Yeah, as far as Lukachevich, I think he would have been a good pickup for the Clan. Certainly, he played very well for Fife in the times that I saw him. Certainly impressed, although there's overall some concerns about his consistency, but there's no doubt he would have been a good pickup for us. As far as going to Coventry is concerned, Coventry, with the re-signing of Chuck Webber coming back as coach, there's no doubt that they're going to be a real contender for next season, and I am particularly interested in who Webber thinks he wants in his team, as well as the fact that with Webber as coach, I think that's a great attraction for Coventry to bring in new players. So obviously Chuck Webber sees something in Lukachevich, so as Stephen said, if there's a past connection there, then that's fine, but it's got to be a bit more than past connections. Obviously Webber, who's coached against him for a good number of years, has seen the talent that the guy's got, and if he's an early off-season sign, then that's I think that in itself tells you a story about Ned. So yeah, a bit disappointed he hasn't come to the Clan, but I'm sure he'll do okay at Coventry.
I'm kind of 50-50, not really too fussed either way about him. I think Ryan would have been the kind of coach that wouldn't have let him away with slacking off. Ryan likes his two-way players, he likes his players to play in both directions. There's no doubt in games against the Clan as well, whenever you saw him coming forward when he was in the zone, he could take the puck from one end of the ice to the other and put it in the net, or create space and melee a pass off for somebody else. He did have that. It was just how often was he doing it? Was it regular enough? And I think for me, when you think about the implications of him signing for the Clan, I think it would very much come down to pounds, dollars and pence. You know, how much was it going to cost compared to how much it was going to cost to get somebody similar or better? And these are all the things as fans that we usually don't get to find out. And I think, yeah, I'm 50-50, kind of meh about him. I'm not bothered that he didn't. I don't even know we were ever in for him. I'm not bothered if we were and we lost out. I'm not maybe convinced that we actually were either, though. So, but I think he'll do well at Coventry. It'd be interesting to see, maybe surrounded by slightly better players that he should have down there by the time they finish building their team, and he's not going to be the one they're going to solely rely on to produce, and that might give him that bit of breathing space to be a wee bit more creative. Also, the news that we've touched on as well, that Ned is signed down in Coventry, is the news that Chuck Webber's returning to take over that role he had last year as being GM, oblique coach. I think the whole of Coventry probably breathed a huge sigh of relief, as the rumours were going around, well before the rumours of Paul Thompson were going around, that it might have been Chuck Webber going to Sheffield. Any thoughts on that, Graeme?
Yeah, well, like you say, it's definitely good news for Coventry, not necessarily good news for the rest of the league. I'm pleased to see him stay, to be honest with you. I think what he brought to Coventry, start of the season, Coventry were going nowhere, a string of bad results, sitting very near the bottom of the league, and to end up as playoff champions as well as a fair turnaround in terms of league position, has just shown what a quality act this guy is, and he brings with him a wealth of experience, and most people's thoughts were that he was just here just to, pick up a bit of money, keep himself busy, he'll sort Coventry out and then be on his way to something bigger and better. And the fact that he stayed is not only good for the league, good for the sport in this country, but it just means that everybody else is going to have to make sure that they raise their game. After all, this is the guy that sacked Gerad Adams, according to one prominent member of the league media. So, you know, he's already got an impressive track record from that point of view. So yeah, I'm delighted to see him stay, and as I say, I think Coventry will be major contenders next season.
Stephen, do you think this is the way that teams are going to start going with this combined GM coach role?
I hope that we don't, because I think the way we've got our setup is the best for the clan going forward just now. But it seems with Paul Thompson at Sheffield as well that this is the way that teams seem to be thinking in terms of going forward. Webber coming back to the league, as Graham said, is fantastic news for the league. I'm hoping that it will lead to other high calibre coaches to think that the AHL was an interesting proposition for them. And as Graham said as well, I could hear the sigh of relief from Coventry that when the news was broken that he'd returned. And I think most people maybe not expect him to go to Sheffield. I think there was a lot of people like myself who thought he'd maybe go to Europe or back to North America to coach, because he is that high calibre of coach. And it'll be interesting to see what he does with all the power this season. He'll be signing his own team rather than inheriting one, so it'll be interesting to see how Coventry do. I think this move is by management has made them think that they'll be looking to not, like, bottom half of the table where they seem to have been the last few years isn't acceptable anymore, and they'll be hoping to become the power that Blaze used to be in the league when they won back-to-back titles. So yeah, I can't wait to see how this season pans out and what Coventry do.
Yeah, I think that the GM coach thing can be a label as such, because certainly, as far as I'm aware at the clan, right, there's not any players are coming to play for us that Ryan hasn't approved or know about. I don't know how much it's just a title as such, and it saves if Ryan's doing some recruitment and then doing some coaching, that's all he has to worry about. The day-to-day GM stuff, I think that's where Gareth obviously comes in, and I don't know the setups at either Coventry or Sheffield, and who's going to do that day-to-day stuff. If there's somebody in the background taking that role, because you don't want Chuck Webber having to organise stuff, mundane stuff during the week. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. Obviously we had the news this week as well that Coventry have linked up on a 2-way deal with Milton Keynes Lightning. I think that's definitely the way to go. The only thing as far as the clan are concerned that concerns me is obviously we've had a kind of tenuous tie-up with Solway, who are a good team, but they're playing obviously in a different league than the EPL. The EPL is probably a higher standard, so you know the opportunity to get players to come in and fill in if you've got a lot of injuries for Coventry are going to be a lot better than the likes of Clan. I mean, to be brutally honest, I remember we had a couple of defenders came up when we were really struggling about 2 or 3 years ago, and they did the job, they were fine, but it's a different league and it's not quite the quality, and it's a big step up. That kind of concerns me that we don't really have the opportunity to have that kind of tie-up. Graham, have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you in the Solway aspect, and I think it's nice to have a supply of young players if you need them. Those were extenuating circumstances last time when we had a very short bench at the time. I think as far as a development route for players, it's a good move. Obviously we've got on the horizon this under-20s league as well, so I'm sure from a Coventry point of view, I wouldn't be surprised if Chuck Webber's had a major say in all of this, even to the extent of saying, look, you need to have this tie-in with another club in a lower division. That's a possibility. So I think it's a good move for any club that does that. You almost get into a kind of NHL kind of situation where they obviously have their affiliate AHL clubs as well as a wider network below that, and I think it's good for a club to have that kind of involvement in terms of potentially bringing players through from a lower league to play in elite league games on occasions where it's merited. As I say, it'll be interesting to see how the under-20s league maybe affects that as well. But I'm sure Coventry will see that as a good move.
Yeah, I think the under-20s league, although we don't really have a lot of detail about it, the Clan were certainly named as one of the teams that were heading down to Newcastle for the meeting to discuss the proposals and where they're going to head with it. Stephen, do you feel it's a good idea, and are you happy the Clan are involved in that?
I think we've been crying out for our own sort of feeder system, feeder team rather, and this is a good way to certainly introduce that. Whereas teams like Edinburgh and Fife and Dundee all have like their teams already in place, so I think this is a good step in terms of Brit development who could go on to play for the clan. But as you said, there's not much news about it just now, so we don't know in what way that's going to be implemented. So it's a case of wait and see, but I think it's definitely a positive step in terms of finally being able to help our own Brits develop.
And that brings us nicely on to the next topic we're going to discuss, and that's the signing of Paul Thompson as the GM, oblique coach of the Sheffield Steelers. Probably the worst kept secret that we had this week. And the emphasis and the PR and the media that was coming out from Tony Smith was all they were going to do this all singing, all dancing, work it from the bottom to the top, and Paul Thompson was the man to do that. Were you surprised that it was Paul Thompson had signed, Stephen?
Not really, especially not when Chuck Webber was announced as going back to Coventry. I think that was who I thought Sheffield would make a real play to get, but they've got someone who's got a proven track record in this league, and he's a winner. He's got a winning mentality, and the old boys club act really. It's like the EIHL Goldfish Bowl goes round yet again. I was talking about last week, as well as a lot of other people on Twitter and other means of social media, that this is a chance for Sheffield to do something like Coventry did last season and go out and grab someone who new to the league, who would bring fresh ideas and a fresh approach and try and get Sheffield to win every trophy in the world and the Stanley Cup just to keep Tony Smith happy. So yeah, it's again not unexpected, especially after what happened with Coventry and Chuck Webber, but I think it's Sheffield fans seem happy. I suppose that's what matters, but I think that this was a chance for Sheffield to step out and try something different.
That was exactly my thoughts when I first heard the news. Although it'd been floating about Twitter for 3 or 4 days and it looked pretty certain it was going to be Paul, I've got nothing against Paul Thompson, but I was kind of a bit deflated, thinking I thought they were going to head in a completely new direction. They were going to bring somebody from out with, as you say, Stephen, the EIHL Goldfish Bowl, somebody completely out of left field, that you just thought it was going to be completely different. And I think there's been a lot of accusations outside of Sheffield of cronyism. Graham, what was your thoughts on Paul Thompson? Were you surprised?
I wasn't really surprised, but I suppose there's two schools of thought as far as how the whole thing came about in the first place. Some people thought that Sheffield got rid of Gerad Adams once they knew that Paul Thompson was available. So instead of maybe this only happening in the last couple of weeks, this actually happened, back in February, I think, was one of the comments, and it was just a question of time for things to pan out. So that's one school of thought. The other thing as well is it may not be a coincidence that Chuck Webber's announced and then almost, very shortly afterwards Paul Thompson's announced. There's a very real chance that Sheffield were trying to get Chuck Webber, and once they didn't get him, then it was wheeling Tomo. So we don't know, we'll probably never know, but I just find it fascinating how the whole thing has played out. As far as being surprised, it's probably the first occasion I can think of where there was far more discussion about somebody being appointed the day before it was actually announced, which is also ironic because it's the Sheffield Steelers we're talking about here, who have a track record of announcing other people's news the day before it's announced. So from that point of view, there's a bit of aside from the irony, I think Paul Thompson being taken on as you say, GM and head coach, I would have a concern about what he can actually bring to Sheffield. Now, the only reason I say that, the guy is obviously much respected in the sport. He is obviously, in my opinion, I think some of his connections mean that he gets a great piece of PR from various individuals, maybe one in particular within the sport. So, woe betide you if you don't think that, he's the best thing since sliced bread. And obviously his track record from some number of years ago is second to none in terms of the achievements that he brought to Coventry, also with some other success with the GB team. So you can't really argue with that aspect of it, but as somebody whose real interest with British ice hockey started just after the glory days for Paul Thompson, I haven't seen that myself. All I've seen is a guy who's obviously tried to make the most of what he can do with Coventry, and with budget limitations and whatever else, it hasn't really worked out for him. And he, for instance, his final season with Coventry, he basically assembled a bunch of players who frankly were probably more suited to being bouncers at their name sponsor rather than actually being on the ice hockey rink. That was my own opinion. I remember voicing that at the time. So I think he probably left Coventry because he felt he'd taken things as far as he could and couldn't really compete with the bigger teams. Obviously he went off to Sweden and then after that Denmark. The team that he took over in Sweden, he couldn't help them to avoid being relegated. And Aalborg, who he was coaching last season in Denmark, finished 8th out of 10. So he talks a lot about what the experience that he's picked up while he was over there, but which is great. And what he brings back is probably the intrinsic factor here. What new does he bring back to Sheffield? Because the truth of the matter is, and I think this is where some Sheffield fans may agree, is what new techniques, what has he learned from his, let's be honest about it, pretty limited time in Europe? What new has he come across that he can now introduce to Sheffield? Because from my point of view, I would tend to agree with the view that I thought Sheffield were really, really going to go for it as far as somebody from North America or one of the top leagues in Europe to really bring in something that hasn't been seen before, almost to the extent of a Chuck Weber-esque type signing. I'm not sure that Paul Thompson is that kind of signing. I'm fully prepared to be completely shot down in flames when he makes it happen for Sheffield. I think there's definite scope for that to happen. I just personally don't see it. I don't think there's enough new to come to Sheffield through Paul Thompson that they need in the league as it is now. Chuck Webber's still there at Coventry. Nottingham, whole different story. They've stayed with Corey. This is probably Corey's last season unless he can turn it around for the Panthers. You've got our situation where we've got Finner, who's still growing as a coach, and I think will be even better than we were last season. So that's a major threat from that point of view. And I think obviously Cardiff, they've turned themselves around as well. So he's coming back to a situation in a league which is much different to what he left. As I say, if I was a Sheffield fan right now, I'd be thinking, well, obviously a quality signing, but is it quality enough in the league as it is now to really make it happen for us, especially when we've had a guy who's basically won as a league and got fired for it. So he's going to have to be a damn sight better, and I'm not 100% convinced that Sheffield have got that, but that's just my view, and probably an unpopular one, but that's my thoughts on it at the moment.
Yeah, I think I've got to agree with that. I mean, I think it's very difficult. I mean, what happens to Paul Thompson if Sheffield don't win the league? Say they win the Challenge Cup, say they don't win anything. Apparently signed a 2-year deal. Are they going to be as forgiving in that situation? I mean, they've sacked 3 coaches in 2 years, which, again, I think I spoke about it at the last podcast. You've got to be a brave man to take that job, because even if you win the league, you're not guaranteed you're going to keep your job. And I heard him talking in his press conference about the way that they brought ideas back from Aalborg, and it was going to be fitness coaches, there's going to be stretching coaches, goalie coaches. Where's the money coming from for all these coaches? I mean, we're not privy to that information, but if I was a Sheffield fan, I'd be thinking the budget can't be that much different unless they've brought on some more major sponsors we don't know about. So they're taking money away from the playing side and putting it into the coaching staff. If they are, it's maybe visionary and it's maybe a long-term view, and they did make a lot of noises about wanting to bring boys from the under-8s all the way up to the elite league level. That's very admirable, but how can you do that in a culture where the Steelers keep telling us it's a winning culture and you have to win things? It's going to be very difficult to achieve both, in my opinion. So it's going to be very interesting to watch it develop. I think Paul Thompson's probably the best British-based coach that we've produced. There's no doubts about that. And by all accounts, and from MD I've spoke to that's met him. He's a lovely chap, but I just don't know if this is the groundbreaking move that we all thought it was going to be. And as I said, when the first news first broke, although we were expecting it, I was pretty underwhelmed. And if I was a Steelers fan, where do you go? Where do you go from winning the league with a new coach, with all these new ideas, and how short is his leash going to be? Stephen?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's difficult to see where, as you said, Sheffield can go. I mean, 2 finals and a league title is really nothing to sneeze at, and we saw what happened with G. So I can't wait for this new season to start. We're only at the beginning of May, and there's just so much happening, which makes you think that the league's going to be the best yet. And from a point of view of how last season went, it's really going to need to be a massive step forward for every team just to keep themselves in it. But yeah, Thompson, best coach Britain's ever produced, as you said, but it's really difficult to see from just an outside view looking in just now how it's going to how he's going to take Sheffield forward, and guess we'll just need to wait and see.
Graeme, anything else you want to say about Sheffield?
No, other than the fact that what you just said, if Sheffield don't have massive success next season and Paul Thompson is kept in the job, then I would expect the daggers to be out from a lot of Steelers fans, and the accusations of cronyism, which are easy to make at this particular stage, and maybe too obvious a call at this moment. But if he doesn't win anything, the precedent has been set, and that's where Tony Smith really needs to decide how he wants to play this out, because, as I say, winning nothing and Thompson stays will, I think, really have the Steelers fans on Tony Smith's back big time. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Yep, I think it's fair to say the majority of Steelers fans on social media seem to be very happy about it, and we know for sure that there's certainly one man that's connected with the club that is extremely happy about it.
To make those rainbows in my mind when I think of you sometime, and I want to spend some time with you, just the two of us. We can make it if we try, just the two of us. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Building big castles way on high, just the two of us. You and I. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Let's get it together, baby. Just the two of us.
And there you have it, another Purple Army podcast in the can. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Graeme Murdoch, who you can find on Twitter at Murdoch Hockey. You can also find us at Purple Army Pod, or on the forum www.PurpleArmyRocks. Until next time, keep it purple.